We're going to begin this morning, this Thursday morning, with Canada once again under fire for the federal government's response to chronic problems in Indigenous communities. Canada highlighted as part of the annual global report from Human Rights Watch, which paints a picture of the world in crisis and of growing authoritarian power. But the report this year also found a beacon of hope in the international response to Russia's war on Ukraine. We're going to begin our coverage this morning with Abby Kugathasan in London. She's been through the report. Abby, let's begin with Canada particularly. What does it say about this country?
Heather, the report echoes the sentiments of the Indigenous community that Canada has not done right by them. Human Rights Watch questions how one of the world's most water-rich nations is unable to provide safe and clean drinking water to its communities. Ottawa pledged to end all water advisories on reserves by 2021, but that hasn't happened. And we know as of September, 28 First Nations communities were still subject to long-term water advisories, which alert people that their drinking water isn't clean nor safe. The report also addresses violence against Indigenous women. It refers to a StatsCan report from May that showed 81% of Indigenous women who'd been in the child welfare system, including foster care, had been physically or sexually assaulted in their lifetime. The Trudeau government had released a national action plan in 2021, but the Native Women's Association of Canada has called the government's performance a failure, Heather.
So Canada's failures singled out, Abby, but this is a report that looks at about 100 countries overall. What's the overall global picture?
That's right. Human Rights Watch highlights what it calls a sea of suffering caused by unchecked authoritarian regimes in particular. It does highlight the suffering caused by Moscow and Beijing, referring to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and what it refers to as open-air prisons in China holding Uyghurs. On Ukraine, the report questions how things may be different today potentially if Western governments had unleashed a tougher response when Vladimir Putin annexed Crimea in 2014, or when he intervened militarily in Syria, or when he was cracking down on his own people throughout his time in office. And while the organization, the NGO, praises the international response to the suffering in Ukraine, it shines a light on the double standard as well by EU states, in particular countries that mostly welcomed Ukrainian refugees without showing the same type of support for others, including Syrians, Palestinians, Afghans, and Somalis. The report applauds nations like Namibia and Indonesia for paving the way for governments to recognize the suffering of Palestinians. It also says Sweden and Finland have been pushing to hold Saudi Arabia accountable, while pointing out that some world leaders like U.S. President Joe Biden have put human rights on the back burner in some instances to secure short-term political wins. We all remember that fist bump with MBS once he was in office, once Biden was in office, even though the U.S. president had promised to make Saudi Arabia a pariah state. Again, the report looking at about 100 countries. They're listed individually and in different sections. And there is praise also now for the work that these nations have done collectively at organizations like the UN as well. But also there's definitely a call here in this report for greater and swifter action, Heather.
Abby, thank you very much. Abby Kugathasan to begin things in London today.